So Craig, you've been working with the development of technology for many years. You have a background in communications and technology, and you've worked with big technology companies. How does this discipline, mind-body meditative discipline, coming out of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, relate to something that seems so different?
Yeah. Well, this has been a long journey for me. I was an academic at first, and I got my PhD in an area of nothing to do with technology. But once I got my PhD, I was already in Boston. I was a fellow at Harvard at the Kennedy School of Government, and a job came up that nobody seemed to qualify for. It was to teach technology to people who are coming from all over the world to learn about how to set policy for their governments in technology. So I began to teach technology, a topic that I knew nothing about, at Harvard, just because I happened to be at a time and place where they needed someone. And so my curiosity emerged back then, which was 20 years ago. And then I began to see how spiritual principles can arise in the shaping of next generation technologies. For example, currently, we're in a moment when virtual reality has sort of captured the imagination of media, investors, and so forth, billions of dollars flowing into virtual reality. And I was invited once to go to a virtual reality studio and learn what they were doing. And I was told that, well, we create simulations of what it means to see and experience visual and interesting visual experiences. And they also create simulations of sound. And they have something called haptic technology that simulates touch. And so I realized that in the virtual world, there were designers in virtual reality that were attempting to create totally new experiences for people based on remaking their senses. But then I said, well, what are the training programs that you have to go through to be a virtual reality designer? Well, it turns out that people are just randomly guessing of what it means to see, what it means to hear, what it means to touch. There's no training offered in the various technology design schools around the world about how to actually, what is experience, to understand what is experience, and what is visual experience, and what it would mean to put the senses together in an optimal way so that you could then transmit that to listeners. So without that training, people go for the lowest common denominator, which might be video games or violence, or just augmenting the sensory impact of senses, which appeals to perhaps young people. So in my interaction with some of the innovators of virtual reality, I began to understand that what we were doing in Mudra could apply directly to the effort to get to a new kind of storytelling. The VR people are stuck with how do you turn that into stories? Well, they're stuck because they don't know what is experience and how to create transformational experiences in a storytelling context that could be transformational, because they haven't gone to the fundamental principles of that field of virtual reality. So, virtual reality began with things like flight simulators, training, or maybe helping people to overcome their fears of spiders or something by simulating a spider. So they're working with very limited expressions of sensory experience. But how about we look to those who might actually know direct experience and then consider how to transmit experience through the senses.